Hey, caregiver, what if I told you to stop putting on your oxygen mask first and just started putting it on, period? Welcome to From Guilt to Good, self-care solutions for busy caregivers. If you're a caregiver stretched too thin, longing for self-care, you're in the right place. I'm Jeanette Yates, your fellow caregiver and self-care guide. Yes, it's true that we should take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others and that we can't pour from an empty cup, yada, yada, yada. But I want us to stop just for a moment and think about something. If the only reason we are caring for ourselves is so that we can care for others, then what are we really saying? What are the implications there? That if we had no one else to care for, that our care would not be valid? Of course not. That doesn't make any sense. But if we keep telling ourselves day after day that we have to fill our cup only so that we can pour it out for everyone else, we are planting that seed of being unworthy for care just for our own basic human existence. In today's episode, we're going to dive deep into the powerful notion that caregivers not only need to take care of themselves so that they can take care of other people, but because they are worthy of love, care, and attention as individuals and as humans. As caregivers, we put the needs of others before our own, often from the time we wake up in the morning until the time we go to bed. The to-do list starts running as soon as our eyes open, and we go through the day from one task to the next, forgetting that we too need nurturing and care. You are human and worthy of care, period. And it's time that we shift our mindset and embrace self-care as a sacred act, honoring our intrinsic worth and nurturing our own well-being. Are you with me? All right, let's keep going. Now, this is a thought shift that can be very difficult, and it's taken me a while to embrace it myself. And there's a lot of reasons for this. First of all, many of our faith traditions have taught us that we are to die to self and lay down our lives and live sacrificial lives. And maybe our family traditions have explicitly or implicitly told us that honoring our relatives meant never saying no, or that setting boundaries was somehow inappropriate with family. Our culture may have placed more value on certain generations or genders other than our own. And we may have been taught that our value is only in relation to what we do or who we belong to or our productivity in this world and in our families. And we may be dealing with some unprocessed trauma that has resulted in shame, people pleasing, codependency, and much, much more. While each one of these areas could be its own podcast episode and probably will be, for today, let me just say this. You are valuable for who you are. It doesn't matter what you do, how much you do for others, or how well you perform your responsibilities. You are worthy. You are important, and your presence matters. Full stop. The end. That is all. But what if you don't believe this? Or maybe the better question is, what if you did believe this? Do you know this about yourself? Do you know your worth and your value? Friend, if you do not, I would love to chat with you and help you reset your self-awareness so that you can make progress in your self-care journey. And I'll talk more about that later in the episode. But for now, I want to talk more about how transforming your mindset about the purpose of self-care to focusing on your care as just being for you instead of in relation to what you do for others. That can be very transformative and very powerful in your self-care journey. Doing that simple shift can make great strides in your progress and success as someone who is working on their self-care. Whether you're working on your physical self-care, mental and emotional health, or all of those things together, just shifting your mindset that you are worthy of care independent of how you interact in the world is going to make you be able to step into some of those self-care activities that maybe you've been thinking you're not worth the effort of doing. It's not about self-indulgence or being selfish. It's about recognizing our inherent value and treating ourselves with care and compassion. I mean, I remember talking to a caregiver recently, and she said, I don't need the perfect self-care plan. I just want to treat myself better than I treat my plants, or as well as I treat my plants. She was making sure that her plants were getting water every day, but she couldn't tell you if she had had enough water in that day. Can you relate to that? I know that certainly resonated with me and how I used to think about things. I was tending to everyone else and not at all to myself. But when we reframe the thoughts about ourselves and our value, it begins to shift our when we reframe the thoughts about ourselves and our value, it begins to shift our perspective on self-care. It's not an optional luxury or reward for completing some of our caregiving responsibilities. It is not something we earn or have to justify or beg for. It is a fundamental act of self-love that replenishes your soul, restores your energy, and empowers you to show up as the best version of yourself. By investing in your own well being, you will find renewed energy, resilience, and joy. You'll develop more confidence in yourself and in your decisions as a caregiver. And this actually happened to me in such a profound way. So I'm going to tell you this story. It's story time. So my mom's been sick for 40 years, so most of my life. And I have been told since the very beginning that putting her in a home, a nursing home, was not acceptable, that it would be um, unfathomable to her. It would be considered a great betrayal to her. Uh, it was something that was not even to be considered, was not even to be considered. It's to be avoided at all costs. And I grew up most of my life believing that that was true, that it was something to be avoided at all costs. But what I wasn't thinking about is the cost to her health, but also the cost to my physical, mental, and emotional health. And so as I started to prioritize my own self-care, trying to get out of that burnout that I was in, get out of that feeling of hopelessness that I just was barely moving through each day, carrying that load on my back, I sought therapy. I began practicing habits that lit me up and filled me up and helped me feel better. All of those things set me on a much better path physically, emotionally, and mentally. And eventually the time came where, it wasn't just me saying, maybe it's time to have this conversation with her, but the doctors, the medical staff, things like that were bringing this up, where the best thing for my mom would be to go live in a facility. So it wasn't just my opinion, although my opinion is valid as a person, but I was hearing this from other people. I had to have that conversation with my mom that I had dreaded since I was a child. In fact, most of my life, I didn't even think about even having this conversation because it wasn't going to happen. Um, I had done everything in my power for as long as I could, including spending too much of myself to keep my mom out of that situation. But it still became necessary. And I was able to walk into her room that day and have that conversation with calm and compassion for her and what this must be like for her to hear these words coming from me, but also with the confidence of knowing that this was a good decision. This was the right decision for our circumstance. And I believe that wasn't because, oh, I knew I had read all the articles or I had known all the things, although that's certainly part of it. But I believe I had so much confidence and compassion and grace and was calm about it and didn't carry that guilt because I had prioritized my care alongside hers. Not as more important than hers, but as important. And I had done the work of tending to my soul and my energy so that I was able to make a decision with clarity, not decisions made in exhaustion and overwhelm. But I was able to make that decision or help her make that decision with clarity, understanding, and while respecting my own capacity for caregiving and my limitations, as well as her capacity for her own care as well. I did not allow fear to make the decision. And that was probably the biggest eye opener for me, that I realized that for so long I had been making decisions about my mom's care and my own care based on fear. But that changed when I started prioritizing my own care. And that is when I knew that focusing on my care, not for the sake of caring for anyone else, but for my own mental, emotional, and physical well being, would intuitively move into my life and impact me as a caregiver, community member, and human being in this world. And if it can do it for me, it can do it for you. Now, I hope you are beginning to see how self care isn't something that we should feel guilty about or push to the side. It's sacred. It's an honor to be able to care for our needs, our dreams, and desires. When we prioritize our self care, we become vessels of love, of strength, and inspiration for others. But wanting to feel worthy of care and actually shifting our thoughts to becoming more loving towards ourselves are two different things. Here are some suggestions to help you begin to incorporate more positive messages in your daily mindset. Number one, get clarity on who you are without your caregiving role. Take some time to rediscover your individuality and reconnect with the passions, interests, and dreams that make you unique. Remember, you are more than just a caregiver. Practice breath work and mindfulness and meditation. These practices help you cultivate presence, self-awareness, and an inner sense of calm. Set aside dedicated time each day to breathe deeply, focus on the present moment, and nurture your inner peace. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time. It can just be 5 minutes. Another thing that might help is to begin journaling about your hopes and dreams. Writing down your aspirations can help you gain clarity, set goals, and remind yourself of the things that bring you joy and fulfillment or used to bring you joy and fulfillment. You can use your journal to explore your desires and track your progress. Of course, this can be a written journal or a digital journal or even just a voice memo. Another thing that if you're like, I don't even have any hopes and dreams, I'm just tired, I get that too. Another thing that you can do is think about when you were a child. What are the things that you loved when you were a child? Maybe tap into some of that passion and some of that excitement from your childhood. I know that was something that I did in my journaling work, and I really started thinking about, ooh, I wonder if I could try this or that again. So it's definitely worth a shot. Okay, another thing that I recommend, and maybe journaling's not for you, all that kind of stuff, but this is something that anybody can do. And I want you to create a list of positive things to say about yourself. I know. Expressing self-love and building confidence is key. And one of the ways to do that is to make a list of your strengths and qualities that you appreciate about yourself. And then you can recite or think about these affirmations or daily positive self thoughts to remind yourself of your worth. Now, if you're thinking, I have nothing, I got nothing, I want you to go to the description or the show notes and download my Mindset Shift workbook. It'll walk you through, it'll give you some suggestions of things that I know are great things about you, even if I haven't met you personally, but I've given you some ideas to start with, and then maybe you can come up with some on your own. And then really, you're just going to practice that gentle reminder that you are worthy of the same care you give others. So I tell people all the time, you are worthy of the same care you give others. And sometimes when that flash of guilt or that tightness in my stomach happens, I just say that to myself, Jeanette, you are worthy of the same care that you give other people. If you continue to just remind yourself of that and you're cultivating that mindset of self-compassion and self-care, then it will become more automatic. So you might not have to be saying it nonstop every day, all day, like I did at the beginning. But cultivate that mindset of self-compassion and self-care and remind yourself that you deserve the same level of care, attention, and love that you give to your loved ones. Like I've said a few times already, think of self-care as something that is sacred. It is a sacred act of self-worth. And it isn't always easy, but it is an essential part of your journey. And it's what is going to help move you toward reclaiming your own identity beyond being a caregiver, preserving your well-being, and showing up authentically for yourself, for the loved one that you care for your family and your friends. Remember, you are not just a caregiver. You are a human being deserving love, nurturing, and fulfillment. Stay tuned for more empowering insights and practical strategies to help you embrace self-care as a sacred act of self-worth. Thank you for joining me today. From Guilt to Good Podcast is a proud member of the Whole Care Podcast Network. To access additional self-care resources that help you feel good, not guilty, check out the video descriptions, or if for my audio listeners, your resources will be in the show notes, including that mindset shift workbook I talked about earlier. Also, I want you to subscribe now and join me in going from guilt to good as you rediscover your worth, reclaim your health, and get back the life you've been too busy or exhausted to enjoy. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a comment, rate, and review. Your voice and your feedback matters. We are redefining self-care for caregivers one episode at a time. And until next time, remember, you are worthy of the same care you give others.